What that symposium is about, we all facing here, especially in Kurdistan region and in Iraq and our neighborhoods country in Middle East, facing more than isolation from the pandemic, also facing the political isolation and the cultural isolation and the artistic, practical isolation, the limitation. That's what make us create many boundaries. What could be possible for creating a collaboration project between the festivals to make contemporary music, experimental music, improvisation, electronic music, noise, and so on, get to the audience. So yeah, our aim with this symposium is in the end coming out with some relevant approaches that we can share with the festivals, and through those approaches, hopefully we could have a long project together that's actually have an impact on both local artists and audience as well.
First, I'd like to say that your festival is one of the successful examples of initiating collaborations, hybrid collaborations. Now I'm talking through a screen, and I can see all of you music professionals in the music business in the Middle East also, which is a rare opportunity that we gather. We always gather with our colleagues from Europe, from North America, from the countries that we usually have funding from. And now this is a great opportunity to see people from the Middle East who share the same experiences and struggle and challenges as well. Started our hybrid things, and we started collaborating with the outer world, and we started initiating really projects, and it was okay. Maybe it was really challenging, but this opened up the chance for us to be open to the whole world. We were able to meet lots of people, lots of professionals, not only musicians, not only to initiate joint projects and productions, and maybe we have lots of projects coming up in the future, which started from last year. So, so we're trying to use technology for our benefit as much as we can, not technology to use us, because what happened is that we're too much Zoom, too much meetings, too much online. We lost our vision, not only our mind. So you reach to a point where you have to balance between your environment, your real life, and your online life.
Okay, what if it's not any funding abroad? For how long are we depending on the European funding? Even the Space21 is funded by the European organizations. But this is one thing that we need actually, or I think personally, we need an infrastructure for our activities. I mean, we are always welcome and we really appreciate those fundraisers. But we need also think from the inside, from the local, how could be possible to organize small projects, not a big project with a big funding.
Yeah, the thing is that we have to create our own business model, not only depending on the European funding, which is a pity actually, because if they don't pay us, we don't do anything. And our governments and our local institutions are in another place, as if we don't exist, you know. It's that the local sponsors or corporate sponsors, let's say, they do they do sponsor commercial events. But here we're not doing something commercial. We do experimental music, we do new things, we do modern music. We don't have masses to attend our concerts. So we can start with convincing the sponsors to change their perspective. Okay, we get you what you want, the visibility and everything, but change your perspective a bit. Try to look at the new audience that we're getting. It's also your audience. It's not only those, your audience. Also, there is another audience that exists in a different place. So we have to change our business model, depend on tickets, depend on merchandise, depends on other bookings, gigs from pubs, from informal venues, from galleries, from any other, and push the government. We have to advocate, we have to be together. We should talk to the government. I mean, one of the things that the governments realized that the importance of music. They even started doing music projects because they finally know that music and art is important. Where are they? So it's a diversifying of our income resources, and then we don't have to earn like we used to earn. If a band takes like 4,000 euros, let it start with less. Let it start with 1,000. Let us be cooperative with each other. If we want to do something, we have to start from somewhere, and as if we're starting from zero again. But one of the things, one of the ideas is that we're starting music residencies. Music residencies, instead of getting like 15 bands all together, coming to Jordan, performing and doing a big thing, we divided the concerts all through the year, like doing the Amman Jazz sessions instead of the festival. This is what we did this year, actually, when we lost all funding. We couldn't do a festival. So we divided the bands, like every couple of months, we get a band from abroad. They work with musicians, local musicians. They tour, they go to the south, north, middle. They meet with other musicians. It's like a residency. They experience the culture. They know about the history. They spend great time, and then they perform, and maybe we record. So it's just trying to be more creative. There's nothing called right or wrong. There's nothing says that a festival should be only live performances. No, we can be creative and create our own shows. Yeah, in the past, we started this idea of collaborating with other festivals in the region. Now it happens, it takes place, and we can succeed once and twice. But in the Middle East, things keep changing, you know? Even sometimes you decide you want to do the festival, finally you will go on with it 1 month before the festival. And this can't happen. I mean, but it happens only in the Middle East. So planning takes time and it gets changed all the time. So the best thing is to be not dependent on anyone, which is very hard. It takes like 20 years at least to be independent, but the idea is to be independent. And then when they see you strong, you become, wow, nice, cool for them. So they start approaching you. This is what's happening with us and other festivals that have been there for many, many, many years, but no one noticed them, only maybe the past 2 years. And then they tell us, oh, you exist since 10 years, the festival. And okay, as a company, we exist from 20 years, of course. But you have to make noise. You have to make noise, whatever it is. Just say, I exist in whatever possible way you have. This is the only way. You should exist and be strong, even if they don't like you, even if they don't like the music you present because it's strange or crazy, you know, how people think. Actually, before the pandemic, we started a network called Music Connect Asia. Music Connect Asia connects all key players in the music industry in Asia continent. Main objectives of this network is to connect the musicians and music professionals in Asia together and to connect Asia beyond. So in North America, in Europe, in many other countries, they have funding. Okay, they have unions, organized unions. We don't have anyone who represent us, even in Asia, even in, okay, maybe South Korea, maybe in Japan a bit, maybe in few countries like China, very influential and very, they have the financial means, but the rest, nobody knows what's happening. So like even us in the Middle East, Jordan, Syria, Palestine, Lebanon, we can barely get to work with each other because of the borders and because of the visas and because of the travel. So everything is difficult. So we started this network, and we, with Global Toronto, we organized two Asia Music Summit. And this summit is like a conference and a showcase festival. It started online, right? But the objective is to become physical. So our next physical edition will be in February in India, actually in Nagaland, northeast of India, where the government have partnered with us to host the first physical summit. This thing is one of the examples for collaboration. And now we know about each other. We know many festivals happening around us. So let's say an artist or a manager or an agent would like to come to Asia. It's not worth all the money if he's going to perform in one country and leave the next day. So there should be a network. That's the bulk booking. Who managed to book like 30 performances in 40 days in Japan. It happens. When you're organized, it happens. And everybody's happy, artists make money, they spend great time, agents are happy, you know, no one's struggling. But yeah, this is the second objective, is not only to connect us together, it's also to create bulk booking. The third thing, we are creating a database. So this should be available soon for everyone. You can register as a musician or as a music professional or a festival director. So there would be a directory to help us. When we want to manage to tour in Asia, we can know who's there, who are the key players, who we can book, the dates, at least the dates. Dates are very important.
Yes, we are a few people working slowly right now on the database, which is international. It's not only focusing on Asia. For independent artists and non-independent artists, it doesn't matter for us. We don't want to create a bridge also between the academic world and the non-academic world. It doesn't matter really for me. I just love music. That's it. So the aim would be to build a database with festival references, venues, and maybe residencies for artists who operate in the field of so-called experimental music, alternative electronic music, noise music, electroacoustic music, improvised music, contemporary classical, and so on and so forth. And we would like to make it public and freely accessible, of course. This idea comes partly from a previous database I built over the years, which is available online, where I list for many years now any artists, bands, venues, labels, radio stations, and so on and so forth, in the same music genres, more or less. So these alternative electronic music, experimental, and so on, from Asia and Africa. Because in, so to speak, like 10, 15 years ago, there was almost nothing, almost no references online gathered on one spot. So for me, it was important to share the information in hope to create bridges and exchanges, not only between the so-called Western world and the so-called global South, but also between countries from some regions. So I also publish a lot of music, compilations, among other things, with a theme. So I published a few compilations around Southeast Asia or Asia in general. In East Africa, for example, you have this festival in Uganda called Nyege Nyege, where those organizers and label and their sub-label really do their best to connect African artists and initiatives, especially from the East, but not only. So a few years ago, I published a compilation called Uchronia, on which you can find Hardi and Rabat also, where I wanted to publish music from the so-called Asian continent. I'm happy that some artists from Japan, for example, told me that they were happy to see there were people in Kyrgyzstan also experimenting with sound and connect with them. And people from Iran telling me, oh, I didn't know there were people in Iraq or Kurdistan doing this kind of music. So it's cool to see that bridges are being created. And again, not only between the West and the rest of the world, but also more, I would not say locally because it's pretty vast, but a different version of it. So I think we need to build further and make more exchanges and more this kind of database, basically. But as much as possible, to me, it should be freely available. That is also a very, very important thing. To not hold things, to not make paywalls and so on. It is not how we can share knowledge and how we can progress, because then you just target an elite like there is the border movement. This is an initiative from the Goethe Institute, as far as I remember, in Berlin, and people in Dhaka. And they have a website with electronica and hip hop and ambient and so on from the region. So it's India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Iran, as far as I remember, Afghanistan as well. And I'm always super happy and pleased that people do their best to accommodate you, to organize the performances, the festivals, and do their best to do something. And those networks are so well connected in Indonesia. It's unbelievable. There is so much alternative music in general in that country. Whatever it is jazz, it is rock, it is punk, it is noise music, anything. It's a very special place. As you mentioned, also the internet can change things if you can perform online. But I think that many people don't focus when you play online. The computer or the phone is maybe on, but I've seen people just chatting after 5 minutes. And the thing is that, unfortunately, when you do an online event, unfortunately, it's great because you can share it with almost the entire world if people are interested in it. But when the event is finished, you just switch off the channel, the computer, while you are on site. When the event is finished, you maybe go to drink a tea with your colleagues, with the audience, and you exchange. And ideas are generated, new projects, and you don't get this online, or very rarely. It happened to me once within a year and a half after a symposium that a few of us stayed in a room and started to chit-chat. But otherwise, so the physical appearance for me is important, even though it should not be mandatory, and it's not always possible. That's it. Not everybody can afford to travel. In some countries, there is this culture of sharing, which is maybe something that partly vanished in the West because of capitalism and other reasons, not only capitalism. I think it's an old story. So, for example, when I was in Uganda, I saw some Congolese artists who were refugees there with no money and no job, who could access a studio and use their equipment there to record their music, their voice. And in Indonesia, also there is also this very deep culture of sharing, where artists would support each other. I don't say that everybody does it, but it happens a lot. So a bit like what the essence of punk is or was, being self-sustainable and supporting each other in organizing a tour, in providing spaces if you know plans to do with little if you don't have the money to do it, which is of course important. But then you need to find like-minded people, which is not always easy. And again, that doesn't mean they are non-existing, but in some countries where There is no real scene, but individuals, like I would say here in Kurdistan and in Iraq, it's individuals here and there for well, plenty of reasons we can understand. It's difficult, but it's not impossible to build up. Even if it's slow, it can take 2, 3, 10 years, but something may emerge. I think this is partly what happened in Iran. Don't you think so? That you go back 15 years ago in Iran, I knew some individuals telling me, I'm the only one doing ambient music. And another one would tell me, I'm the only one. Or tell, no, you are a bit more, but you are not connected yet, because it was difficult back then, simply. But then with the time, something has been built in Iran, and there are festivals and so many artists now.
I know some things about music, and everyone knows about the isolation. So I'm here to add my couple of my remarks and observations about how things have changed during the past 2 years. And I find it so nice to speak about the meanings, the words that our subject holds, like the politics or the isolation. The politics, the Greek word, affairs of the city, it is much more about, has a lot about the making the decisions in groups, or when we want to think about the matters between individuals, like distribution of resources or status. So as we see, music is also now part of the world, and it can play a great role for the same distribution of power or material or status. So my interpretation of the term suggests that we are going to have, how to say, a group meeting of thinking about the subjects that we are experiencing in our own culture, so that we can arrive for some conclusions that are working, that would be going to work for everyone. And the other word, isolation, that the subject end with, is also something a bit problematic. What are we isolated from, and who are the isolated people? I just first wanted to, not to negate, but to tell everyone that a lot of people that I may represent, or myself, are isolated since we were born, because getting a visa, being into the system that trapped us and makes us powerless, and so on and so forth. So speaking about isolation, specifically about musicians, people who are making music or writing about this or running the label or institutions to promote this, or the magazines, all of them, when we want to be working in the field that are less related to mainstream music, we are all isolated in a sense. So we all experience this, and some years ago, I've been experiencing experimental with sounds and music since long ago. And some years ago, I started to realize that after learning a little bit of English language and becoming in touch with other people in other countries, I realized that there are a lot of things missing in my culture. And this is about having an excellent Persian traditional music, and something like pop music, something that I don't appreciate as something like really excellent, and the classical music, who some of my friends right now call museum music, into the old connotations. So after realizing and working with contemporary musicians who are trying to bring change, or how they say, put into words, or do something that are new in the term of global thoughts or currents, I realized that this the dichotomy, maybe this binary between Persian classical music and pop music, is so vain, because we have a lot of stuff, a lot of subgenres in between in the spectrum. And as Cedrik mentioned, we have some pioneer musicians, people who are pioneering electronic music, a lot of people who translate, people who are into philosophy. So I decided that maybe I start to translate the text from the sound theory that are so vital to the future of our people, because we may have a lot of them in another sense, but when the texts are translated, everyone becomes sure that there's nothing more. This is the end of it, so you can go and practice, or you can develop more ideas. There's nothing from the past that you may wonder, and not to consider my country and people as people are really outdated, but I found it so essential to translate some of the text from that. The movement that are associated with independent music and having labels and realizing something that this economy, the economical matters, being a part of the industry of music, and this is so important. I started to make a label to find a name, which is noise. Noise, which means it means noise in front of a noise. It was so fun at first to call for friends, people who are abroad, people who, just like Cedrik, wanted to contribute to make a bigger, how they say, compilation album. When we were going to start this, it was so nice, and we made the label. It was the start of it. But the thing that we're right now speaking about is the isolation during the time. A year after, I believe it is a year after we started. When I started it, I asked some of my friends like Muhammad Reza Morego and Sina, who I performed with, and we published 2 live albums. We didn't have a lot of stuff for mastering on the label. It was with Sina Soheili, because we had 2 live shows, and we realized that we did not have the type of results that we want. Not a lot of people have listened to it. Isolation helped us think about this during a time.
Isolation helped you. So yes. Kind of this way, how we maybe take this isolation as a negative, but actually it could have a positive impact, could give you the creativity to think on an alternative way. How you perform in Tehran, for example?
Small spaces that we know, because we work also for theater, for have the stage performances. So sometimes we take those spaces to make some performances for our own, and mostly invite people who are more acquainted with the type of the thing that we are doing. We were like the others of music, because it is a lot of pop music that I don't really appreciate, and I can prove that it's not music. The nature of music or sounds are ruined. It is like the copy of the other. I can prove that none of them has any creativity. I can bring examples are copying either from past, or the producer is betraying people and the artist by producing the same material in the same tonality. People at home were bored. They're like, okay, let's listen to some noise. It's like committing suicide. You won't believe I'm free right now. I've done whatever, most of the things that I needed to, and my friends can do the rest. Yeah, it was about how we were puzzled about the production, promotion, and almost no magazine that write about experimental music, but maybe classical music. But the guy from contemporary music, my friend who is working there, dedicated a portion of his work to promote us, just like the podcast series for the all-female composers album.
If you have an idea for tomorrow to do a festival in Tehran, how it's possible?
It is really possible right now, because right now the label is just a name. We have a lot of people who are really looking forward to this. I find no barrier to what we are doing, just like taking permission.
I think artists in the diaspora maybe have a different set of complexities. Yes, connected to identity, but also connected to power structures. And I feel that, for example, I work in opera, which is traditionally a white, middle-class, upper-class space. I am brown, working-class background, growing up in London. So it wasn't my space. Does that make sense? I had to find a way into this space. And I spent probably the last 20 years asking a lot of these questions like, why me? Why not me? When, who with, where, how, where are the doors that I'm supposed to open? How do I open them when I get there? Who is guarding these doors that I can't see? Who are these guardians of these doors who I've never met? Yeah. And I feel like my conclusion after all of this exploration and questioning and self-questioning is all of this questioning is useless. All of it. It is meaningless. It does nothing. It progresses nothing. So I am extremely happy and enthused to hear the actual work that is happening from Lama, from Cedrik, from Soheil, and from you, because really, ultimately, the solution is to do the thing, right? Is to do the work. And that's the same for diaspora artists. It's, you know, I can sit there thinking, I was thinking, okay, nobody would give me funding for my full-length opera. Oh, I did it anyway, somehow. Little things, little ways. It was not perfect. I did not have a 3-year research and development process. I did it anyway. I composed it. I asked my people, the people I have made music with in the past, the people I respect and who respect me. I explained to them the situation. I said, look, this is the situation. I've written this. I want to perform it. Will you come on board with me? Will you support me and hope for the best with me? And they did, you see. And this is it. Ultimately, it's just the doing the work. You have to do it anyway. If it's little and for free and loss-making, or if it's big and you have a nice fee and it's funded, ultimately it all balances out. Let's be honest, no one gets into experimental music because they want to get rich. No. Yeah? It's the worst get-rich-quick scheme ever, ever, followed by contemporary jazz maybe, right, yeah. Lama? So nobody comes into it to get rich, and yet we are all obsessed with money. Yeah. And we are all obsessed with funding, and it infantilizes us. We have a lot more power than we think. Our societies, I feel, have been at the forefront of radical thought and radical art for decades, centuries. Yeah, we have been about new things, inventiveness, creation of new things, progress, new ideas, all of these things. I was saying, we were talking about, say, feminism, and it's like, we have, for example, some of the words I'll be singing tomorrow is from Nazik al-Malaika, an Iraqi feminist born in the 20s, writing things which people were not even thinking about yet in the Western world, you know, and breaking apart poetry and the structure of poetry in ways which, I mean, it was revolutionary. And we have these people among us, we have them all around us, these critical thinkers, these pioneers. And in the spirit of that, we continue, like we are all here doing this, and yet what has changed? Well, I think one of the things that Lama said about independence and a sustainable business model, and something Cedrik said about sharing, and really struck me, because art has never self-sustained. I mean, when has art ever sustained? From Beethoven to Monk to now, when has art been self-sustainable or a good business model in on itself? Never, never, ever, ever. So nothing is new for us. Actually, we have more than they ever did, because we don't have to rely on one patron. You know, we can rely on each other and share. We can create formal and informal collectives. We have the potential to not duplicate effort, because I think I'm hearing some of that. Like Cedrik has done enormous work. If I didn't know about you and I thought, you know what, it would be a really good idea to start collecting up some details of people from around the world doing this music and duplicating your effort. Or if I didn't know Lama's Asian network, do you see what I mean? So there is a lack of, even in the most communication-able time, where you have diaspora and people in this part of the world and around the world who can easily now communicate, we still don't quite have information sharing down. You know, we still don't have the same ability to sort of say, wow, I can say to Cafe Otto in London, actually, I know this great label in Tehran. I think we should try and do something with them. Do you see what I mean? I can't do that yet, because of a lack of awareness and a lack of information sharing. In London, I have a grime label. It has the spirit of punk, I think, grime, which is why I like it as well. As grime is I mean, I don't know how you would describe it. For me, it's underground electronic music, really, that came out of London in the, I would say, late 90s, early 2000s, 90s, 2000s. But really, and you know, and it has the spirit of, you know, it has the sort of relationship between the DJ and the MC, like you would have in raga and then also in hip hop, but the lineage is more from Jamaica. And yeah, so the thing with that, it is one of the most popular genres among a certain groups and age groups, but it has only receives 1% of public funding in the United Kingdom, okay? And it has had to somehow self-sustain and be creative about how to do that. And I think it is a brilliant model, actually, similar to the way that punk existed. I think it is a brilliant model for us to emulate, because there is a sharing of resources such as studios and equipment. There is a immediacy and spontaneity which doesn't involve overthinking. You know what I mean? It's like people will walk up to go to a venue and say, I want to put on a show, and usually the venues say, if they love the music, they'll go, cool, let's do it, or they'll say, let's just go to studio and record an EP today or tomorrow or next week. There's no this overthinking, churning in the doing. It's very spontaneous and active, and it's because there is an existing network of things, whether that is a existing network of spaces or existing network of equipment or existing network of something. So the way I feel is that if in any locale we can create a network of available spaces, equipment, people, etc., it can first of all accelerate the amount of music that gets created, but also potentially allow for more spontaneity, that I think this music requires that. When there were protests here, whatever, there's so much in this sort of music, you have this feeling and you want to go, and sometimes you can't, and then the moment passes, and then the music doesn't get made, it doesn't get recorded, and there's no documenting. There is an opportunity here to create something much more organic and powerful. In terms of, when I say powerful, I mean when the artists hold the power. I feel that's really important. I mean, I think as diaspora artists working in Europe, in the Western world, I think we have as I said earlier, these additional complexities. One of them is two sides of the same coin, I guess. On one side of the coin, we can be orientalized very easily, pigeonholed very easily. They demand that our work is political in a certain way. Maybe I just want to write something about love, Maybe I want to Complain about my father for 2 hours. It's up to me, right? I am the artist. I can do what I want. The fact of the matter is that very often that is not allowed, because if you are Iraqi and then we want to hear something about your Iraqiness, well, that's complex in its own self, right?
That's true.
This is already a complexity for me. So Lama said at the beginning that we have shared challenges and a shared understanding. And I think those shared challenges, shared understanding facilitate a musical language. You, myself, and Khabat, we met at Cafe Otto, right? I came to your wonderful performance. And then we went in to a rehearsal room and we just spoke to each other. No problem, And I think what can happen is we can create some really elevated music with that approach, Hardi, is that I think we all have something shared in our blood, in our bones, in our history. We have a love of living, as well, and a drive to move forward. We're all leaving something in the past collectively as well. We're all trying to, anyway. I just wanted the wonderful Bell Hooks, who's the Black feminist critical thinker and poet, died last week, and I saw something from her, and I would like to read it, please, if it's okay.
Yeah, please.
This is what she wrote, and I think it's very true for us. She said, "In this house, we live by a love ethic. We show care, respect, integrity, and the will to cooperate. We hold a generous and neighborly view of self-preservation. We do not believe we can flourish by the rule of dog eat dog. We do not believe that we can succeed by defeating, destroying, or selling, or using up everything but ourselves. We believe good solutions are not produced by violence. We want to preserve the precious things of human culture and pass them on to our future generations. We believe no commonwealth or community interest can be defined by greed. We understand work is necessary. It should be good, it should be satisfying and dignifying to the people who do it, and genuinely useful and pleasing to the people for whom it is done. We learn to face our fears. Our fears may not go away, but they will not stand in the way. We let our light shine. We draw to us and are drawn to other bearers of light.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, can you please tell me something about your band, which would be performed tomorrow?
My name is Mir. I'm from Slemani. I'm here with my band, Dark Phantom, Sarmat, Murad, Mahmoud, and Rabin. Yeah. We're playing a mix of thrash and death metal. I believe we are the first band to do that in here, like do it publicly, at least. So we've of course had problems doing this in the first place, but we've always tried to do what we like. I would say we play noise music, but it's not, I couldn't say like completely noise music, because it's noise in a constructed manner, and it has a more of a mainstream appeal. So we do kind of try to be in between of like mainstream and something creative and new.
How the band is started? Where it started? Who started this band? And where this idea came from?
Back in 2014, I had another band here in Slemani, and Dark Phantom used to be a rock band in Kirkuk. So after my band, we broke up. I started talking with Dark Phantom and saying that we should collaborate together.
But their band was already...
They were already a band, but they were playing
Which
rock.
time around?
2014.
So they started 2014?
No, they started 2009.
Yeah.
Yeah, they played rock until 2014.
Okay.
That was the time when I joined the band.
Okay.
So we discussed it that we wanted to play something heavier than rock. So we decided to play a mix between thrash metal and death metal. We've never had a specific rehearsal place. At the beginning, we used to rehearse at Murad's house, and then we took a small studio in Kirkuk. We rented it, and now we can say we kind of practice in between here and Kirkuk.
The band is based in Kirkuk.
The band is based in Kirkuk, yeah, because I'm the only one who is from Slemani.
Yeah, the idea with the mixture of different cultural backgrounds in the band, what that came from? It's from the reflection of this conflict, political conflict in Kirkuk between all these minorities, or it's just become like this? It had no intention.
I guess for most of my bandmates, like all they know is war. Like if you've grown up in Kirkuk, all you know is war. It's always on the TV. So you kind of have no other option, you know. It would be the first thing to go for, the topics we talk about. So basically, because we also come from different ethnical backgrounds, like we have 2 Turkmen and 1 Arab and 2 Kurds in the band. We do speak in different languages. So I would say Arabic is the most common language, but we all use like 4 languages always for practice and everything. I would say that's what had the subjects to come about.
The idea becomes after Iraqi war in 2003, when I wasn't like 15 years, I think, when I talked to American soldiers in the streets, and I get Metallica CDs from there. And I used to be listen to pop and traditional music, but when I listened to Metallica first time, I see the music was heavier, and we were in war situation, and the subject was different, like talking about the miserable and war. this was like a first time I listened to this type of the music. The idea becomes this, that I say to myself, why I not making the first rock metal band in my country, in my city, in Kirkuk, and I shared this idea. Me and between my cousin Rabin, we played, we learned played guitars together, and I also I shared the idea to different friends in college or in social media, and I collect them, and we create a Dark Phantom. And in 2009, we started rehearsals and playing in my home, and then we create our first concert in Kirkuk in 2011. We organized it by ourselves. We played like a rock and metal music, but not so heavier and extreme music. And after that, we got attacked by Al-Qaeda. You know, they texted us a message from our pages, and in our studio, they send a message, stop playing this this forbidden music. This music is, they say this music is talking about the Satans, or they put it in satanic matters, you know. We stopped it at that situation. You know, Kirkuk city was not stable. The situation was very bad, and we scared about ourselves. Exactly when they know our names and our family names, we stopped like 1 year. We decided to didn't make any concerts in Kirkuk city. We started and recorded a small demo. It was like 4 tracks, and then but the quality was very bad. You know, we didn't have any experience in recording or mixing, but we get a label from Sweden company about that because we were first band from Kirkuk. They supported us, but after that, 2 of our members they left our bands, the vocals and the drummers. The vocals, he traveled outside of the city because the situation was bad, and the drummers, he said, I don't get any money from the music. I just put money to play, but I didn't get any profits, you know. We decided to bring, we searched a lot, but it's hard to find metal musicians.
If there exist.
Yeah, exists. You know, we found Mahmoud as he's old drummers who was left the music since couple years, but we discussed with him and he accepted our idea, as we are a metal band, and Mir also he was a vocals and guitarist in Soheil, and we created we changed our genre, you know, from rock and metal music to thrash death metal more extremely, and we had an album and we get many record labels from different countries.
What would be your next project?
Actually, for myself, I will never be quiet for playing music. And then our next steps, we are working or recording our next album. It's more heavier, and it's our idea is mixing between Eastern melodies into metal music, you know. As we say, like a mixing, like an Oriental metal, you know.
But one thing that we forget, the next generation, which is at 10 years now, and in 10 years there will be 20 years.
Yeah.
And I guarantee your band will not fail, because then you have a generation full of fantastic drummers. In the end, the Dark Phantom will continue because they build this kind of generation. We're thinking about 10 years, 20 years in front of us. So we absolutely not be so selfish about how famous we become, instead of how we can take this journey and leave it for the next generation. Otherwise, we will suffer and suffer again and again and again, and no end. So that's important to have in our program. Like, for example, tomorrow we have a class from the school coming, and we have a radio laboratory by Max and Tina, and show them how they can play with sound. Some this kind of approaches, I wish that we had this communication again between diaspora artists
and the local artists to show like this is not about our day, this is about the others people's days in our hands. So we need to be so responsible because we don't have a cultural politics structure. So we need to take care of all by ourselves. We need to think about those kids in the school. They don't have music, they don't know about metal band. Your example is so interesting. You didn't know about the metal band until this US military give you this band. So you know about, so the band started by sharing the information. So just imagine by one, it make change. And that if we all share, just imagine how much impact or changes we can do. We do a lot in the school. So now they say metal, it's a abandoned music. Sure, because we did so much noise, as Lama says, we need to do a lot of noise in school, a lot of noise in street, a lot of noise in the publishing. So we need to have all of these spaces to fill in.
I think one of the things that I'm very passionate about is taking music in places that, in spaces and in front of audiences where it doesn't usually happen. So, for example, opera, we did opera in a shopping center, or opera in places where, oh my God, what is this? Or in schools, in primary schools and things like that. And you have, young kids, they run up to you and they're like, wait, where are you from? Like, are you Muslim? Are you Arabic? What is this? And you could see their little brain going, trying to figure out how this music and this thing and this person come together. And I think that's going to be really true with you. I don't want you to ever underestimate your impact, because you create a space for new thought in these young minds, or anyone who stands in the audience for you. You create this space for possibility, permission. You give permission. And permission, I think, is so vital. If Hardi stands and does his strange music, he gives permission that strange music is okay, And if you make loud music, you give permission that loud music and being angry and voicing that rage is okay. And if I stand up and I scream, same. Yeah, it's kind of saying, no, this is okay. And I think, I really feel like a lot of this, the funding thinking needs to go into education projects and exposure projects and the very slow creation of new audiences, but beyond new audiences, new participants.
Yeah, hello everyone. Thank you so much, Hardi, for giving me the opportunity to be part of this wonderful panel. I've been really enjoying the previous talks. Lots of common ground, lots of possibilities for future collaborations and partnerships. And I have to say that it's, it fills us with hope seeing such a festival taking place in Kurdistan, in Slemani. I mean, when we first met, I was really surprised to hear what you guys are doing there. And it's really great to see it happening and being part of this. I hope next time it will be possible for me to travel there and be, and join in, because after the talks, in between the concerts, usually it's where the most interesting conversations take place, and we miss that here, So let me, start with a little bit of background on how it all started. Borderline Festival is a festival of Onasis Stegi. It started when Stegi started as a cultural venue back in 2010. But I've only been curating the festival since 2018. And when I started creating the festival, Chris Karas, the director of the artistic director of Stegi, proposed the idea because there was a wider collaboration between and focus on Beirut, that we develop a partnership together with Irtizal Festival. So the discussion started in 2018, and 2019 we had this partnership. It's been one of the most successful parties we had so far because um, there's lots of common ground, and it was really nice to see, a community developing between local artists and artists from Beirut, and also having so-called international artists traveling in both cities. Because the idea was that Beirut took place, Irtizal took place 1 week before Borderline. So we had lots of artists traveling to Beirut, performing in Irtizal, and then coming to Athens. And this idea of, especially for, for countries like in Greece, where in the periphery of Europe, that we could act as bridges with, with cities and countries that are located outside Europe. I think there's lots of potential in there, as we can develop. So, for example, if there's a touring artist performing in Athens, it's quite easy that they could also go and perform in, like in a neighboring country, not just Italy, and but also from the other side, which is not often the case. So this is something we definitely need to develop. And so we developed this program in collaboration with Syrphe, who's I don't know if he's here with us from joining us from the airport or not. Maybe
not actually.
And so we had a total of about 8 or 7 acts that did follow this route. And the plan for this year is that we are going to extend that so that we have artists performing in Beirut, in Irtizal, then in Cyprus in a new festival, that's possibility, still we're developing this idea, and then Athens. So we don't have the gap in between those 2 dates of, like 4 or 5 days that, artists need to stay in a city. Although thinking about how things are shifting because of environmental changes, maybe, we have to think again about that. Do we really want artists to travel to a city and stay for just one evening and go to the next city? Maybe there's something to develop there of potentially having artists staying in cities for longer periods of time and being involved in longer projects. But that's a different story. So so that was what we did basically, and that's how I got the opportunity to meet you, Hardi, and to develop the partnership that was unfortunately cancelled because of the pandemic, but will take place in April and also the following years. So the idea that we developed with Hardi was that we extend this collaboration, we continue the collaboration with Irtizal, and we also add Space21 within this context. So we have artists traveling in all 3 cities. And so what's important about those networks is that, I had the opportunity myself to visit Irtizal, to meet Hardi, to develop this new partnership. Also, I attended some very nice, very interesting concerts. So, for example, that's where I saw Alya Metwali performing. And then we invited Alya. She performed in Athens 2 weeks ago at Tectonics. And I'm sure that that was a good opportunity for her. And I'm sure that there will be more performances, especially because of her performance in Athens, because we had lots of curators that were really interested in her work. So I believe that Athens can be a place where it can give opportunity to artists that are located outside Europe as a step towards more, like the Central Europe. Although, we have to question, if that's the aim, or if the aim is that we actually extend that so we have a truly international scene and we're not that much dependent by, like Central European funding. And within that context, I have to say that the situation in Greece, although we're in a European country, is not is quite different from most European countries in the sense that we don't have that much funding for the arts. I mean, there's no new music ensemble institution funded by any institution. Is all mostly private initiatives and groups of people that really rely on performances that they might have like 3 performances a year. So they have to find a balance between like all sorts of different engagements and managing to keep the projects going. And also in space in Irtizal, I also met Julia Gelhalt, who was here a couple of weeks ago again. And here I have to say that, like it's really nice to, have also Cedrik in the panel, because although we haven't met Cedrik, your database has been really helpful for me to find artists from the Middle East and from Africa. So that's how I want to start my talk today. And I've also, like shared it with quite a few other people that are interested in finding more about artists that are not located in Europe. So thanks a lot for that database. And it's also great to hear, Hardi, that you're also starting to develop such kind of a database in Kurdistan. In a way, such a kind of a database would also be helpful for local artists in Greece as well, because as the underground scene here in Greece is not that much connected with the rest of Europe. I mean, there are lots of artists that might feel isolated, and and as a country on the periphery of Europe, and as a country which has no if you see the map, it's clear that, it's kind of an illusion that Greece is part of Europe. It's a Balkan country, and the need to identify Greece as a European country connects back to the history, to the ancient Greeks, and the need of the European identity to connect with ancient Greek values. There's definitely a need for that kind of network to develop, or for databases and partnerships. And I also need to mention another issue that, also within Greece, it's kind of difficult to keep the balance between what I mentioned before, the underground scene, which is really, based, is the punk scene, the DIY scene, which is based on, that you just do it yourself. And with festivals like Borderline, where you have a big organization, a corporate structure that funds a festival. So there's always, it's again, and internally also within Greece, within Athens, we also always try to find a connection between these two. And sometimes it's hard because there are lots of politics involved, and it's necessary to develop a connection of trust and responsibility, because the intention is that festivals like Borderline are not the scene. They support the scene, but they cannot replace the scene. The scene is the local scene is what is alive in the city, and it's not just a single event once a year. But a festival like Borderline can support local artists by giving, opportunities and properly paid gigs once a year. It's something. And so we try to also develop projects that might have a more long-term aspect, and not just one-off performances. And the same applies to those kind of international partnerships.
Thanks very much, Hardi. I probably won't go over 20 minutes, because actually I want to have a bit of a discussion, because I think there's so many interesting resonances happening. But yeah, it's great to be invited to take part in this event, and wish I could be there in person, but hopefully in the future. Michalis, thank you so much for that talk there. I mean, the collaboration with Ichijal and Borderline is really exciting. I'll be talking in the latter part of my talk about a new collaboration between Space21 and Sonorities, but I think there's definitely some things, some lessons learned that we could take from your work. I'm particularly excited about this idea of having a single event across two cities. And it was mentioned in the video, not just creating a touring circuit, but actually doing something together across interfestival collaboration. So yeah, also thank you for everyone who presented in the first session this morning. Actually, great to start with some music first thing. It's always great, we talk about things, but actually, in the video we just saw from Borderline and also in the opening, having some live music really sets the tone. And we're all here really as artists, as makers, as people engaged in music making, and it's nice to have that up front. So I really like this theme of sharing that was discussed in the first part. And it's not just the sharing of resources, which we know are scarce and we have to share to do anything, but also the sharing of practices. I think this is interesting as a theme. And also the kind of solidarity that exists across the diverse genres and cultural practices that we've been discussing here at the symposium so far, from grime to thrash metal and punk and noise. Really, I think there is a sense of solidarity there, which is really exciting. And another thing that from the opening session that really jumped out at me, which I think is important to reflect on, is that yes, we're interested in developing audiences, but not just as passive audiences, but as potential participants. I thought this was a great comment. And that by doing the kind of work that we're doing, which is often very out there on the fringes of cultural practices, we're legitimizing these things for other people. We're legitimizing the unfamiliar. Another theme that really resonated with me is this kind of idea of developing new ways of inhabiting everyday spaces. So it's not just stuff that's happening in institutions, be they academic or professional arts institutions, but out throughout the city, in everyday spaces. And with that also is the kind of mourning that we're all feeling from being separated from those spaces at the moment. And this is something that we're all kind of going through this period of isolation from the pandemic together. And another thing that I think jumped out at me as well is like strategies for collaborating from a distance in that context, whether it's from our bedrooms or in other locations. So yeah, so lots of food for thought from that opening session. I thought it would just be useful to start with reflecting on a bit of that. In the spirit of sharing, I thought I would start with talking about one of my own projects that developed during the pandemic, which specifically looks at collaboration strategies from a distance. It's involving myself. I'm based in Belfast, on the island of Ireland, with Adam Pulse-Melby, who's based in Berlin, and John Bowers, who's based in the north of England. So this trio that we developed was pandemic native, as we call it. So started. We'd played together in different contexts, but never as a trio until we formed as a group during the pandemic. And we were particularly interested in not just trying to overcome the challenges of working online, but actually amplifying and exaggerating those challenges and using that as potential for creative approaches. I'm going to talk about this festival in Belfast, Sonorities Festival, which I'm currently director of. The festival began in 1981, so 40 years ago, in Belfast during a period of civil war here, actually. So very different but related context to what we're in now. I've been working on the festival committee and team since 2008, and I took over as director in 2018. The festival originally was framed as a contemporary music festival existing through Queen's University Belfast, but has since kind of expanded its remit with basically any kind of music that is sort of interesting, challenging, So everything from electronic club music nights, noise concerts, the classical, quite a lot of sound art as well. So really not just music, but also interactive installations, and increasingly more digital and hybrid artworks as well. A lot of the work relates specifically to place and space, so it's not just happening within the university buildings, but also all across the city, in disused mills and other found and reappropriated spaces. There's quite a lot of locative media and sound walk based works that actually explore the city. And really it's about creating new opportunities for thinking about what Belfast is in terms of a city of music and a city of sound. Right. So most recently, we are now exploring a new collaboration with Space21. I was put in touch with Hardi through the British Council, who's kindly will be supporting the initial phases of our collaboration. And for this, we're keen to develop. Again, I think the example of Borderline and Intradol was inspiring there, and I think there's some resonances in the approach that we're looking to develop, not just kind of an exchange of artists in a typical sense where artists come to us, stay for a few days, and then go on to another activity, but actually, collaborations between artists across the two different festivals, across two different locations, whether in person, or online, or some hybrid form of that. Events that happen in both festivals at the same time, or across the cities at the same time, where they're located. So really, this collaboration, the main aims are to pilot approaches for these types of artistic exchanges, and to explore possibilities for collaboration between artists in each location, supporting the creation of artistic works to be showcased at both festivals, and really to try to develop new models for interfestival collaboration. So not just the sort of streaming and kind of typical things that we're used to now, but to try to come up with different strategies. And here as well, it's also not just strategies in the art making itself, but also in how festival audiences and participants that are in line or across different locations actually interact with each other. So we're starting to think about how work could be made that actually addresses this issue that was raised earlier, where people, maybe they're watching an online stream at an online festival, and they're kind of easily distracted, and then when the stream's over, they turn off their machine, and that's it. Where if you're at a festival in person, you're much more immersed in the whole experience, but also there's all the things that happen in between concerts and presentation of works. And how can we actually encourage some mode of interaction beyond just kind of checking in temporarily and then shutting off. So these are some of the questions that we'll be asking, and we're going to begin this collaboration initially piloting an exchange between Hardi and I. I guess this is the beginning of that. Right now, with me presenting some work at the festival, both an installation and this talk right now, and also Hardi doing the same in Sonorities, but then very quickly moving towards bringing in other artists from both locations to kind of brainstorm and develop projects and ways of collaborating, and then with the support of the British Council, actually doing some level of artist exchange, leading to presentations at the 2024 version of each of the festivals. So Sonority runs every 2 years. So our next edition is in April, and then this collaboration sort of is more long-term focused, with the next kind of outputs coming from this artistic exchange happening in 2024. We're hoping to pilot these kind of ideas of interfestival collaboration, but also to then expand it to other festivals and to other organizations that are interested in a similar approach to collaborative forms of audience development, mentorship, and exchange.
Promoting audience, this is absolutely important. One of the biggest issue here, that's why artists don't play this kind of music because there is no people listen to. But that is wrong. There is people listen to, but we never did. We never showed them how our music sounds.
I just want to add a couple of things that I forgot to mention previously, that part of the collaboration with Irtizal involved also a collaboration between artists from Athens and Beirut. That was really important because it wasn't just that the local group traveled to Beirut and then played in Athens again, but they had to they went to Beirut a few days before Irtizal, rehearsed together, performed in Beirut, and then Athens. So yeah, that's also quite essential, I believe, and we intend to keep on supporting that kind of projects.
Yeah, and I like the idea when first I met you, Michalis, and we discussed about the program possibly to do it for 2019, and the way how we share artists, the way how we co-curate, and the way how we program the program together. It's not like, okay, I send those artists and you send some artists. Always been kind of really artistically discussing about how this program develops.
Thank you both for your talks. There was a lot of emphasis about the search for artists and the development of databases and things like that. And I wanted to ask about the extent to which there are efforts to use technology to decentralize and democratize that process. So for example, a friend of mine, Corey Mwamba, who, do you know him? Electronic music artist in the UK and improviser and educator. He started something called the Rhizome, RHIZOME, for improvisers and UK jazz artists, essentially, who could add themselves to what is essentially a map of UK artists, if that makes sense. And it's a really fantastic tool, which is underused, of course, as always good initiatives tend to be, but it's still nonetheless, I think, it's there, it's present, and he's done what he can to create what I would call an active invitation for people to add themselves themselves directly into the database. That's one thing. The other thing, and I have to be careful not to project from one genre too heavily onto other genres, but I think when we think about power dynamics here, I think it's an important point. When I was at Britain Peers, which is like quite a major opera organization in the UK, they asked me, why have we, because I had gone there to do a workshop, they asked me, why had we not heard of you as a soprano? Because we don't have a lot of dramatic sopranos of this level, et cetera, how have we not heard of you? I said, because people like me who are traditionally marginalized from certain spaces don't tend to apply. So we need a much more active invitation. So my question for you is, both of those. What are we doing about democratizing that sort of making yourself known process and giving people more access to make themselves known to you? And the other question is, what does active invitation look like in this context? That's my question.
Great questions, and really ones that we're actively thinking about here with Sonorities in particular. To start with the kind of idea of decentralization, and actually most of the festival. So the festival this year is about 120 artists from 30 different countries, and most of them have booked through open calls, sort of themed open calls. There are some invited artists, but most of it is curated with different groups of curators. And I'm keen to take that even further and have an open call the next time around, which is properly decentralized, which is actually negotiated by participants and people involved in the festival. So I'm trying to look at and think through models of how that might happen. But I think that's a very positive direction of travel, I think, and one that we need to be aware of. I think particularly with us, in sort of I guess Belfast is Western Europe, even though we're out in the corner of it and still part of the UK, but on the corner of it and part of Ireland. But we are attached to a very sort of Anglo-American kind of circuit of invited artists most of the times, and we're keen to break out of that. And one strategy is to do that through the open calls. But of course, the other part of your question is really crucial as well. How do you encourage applications from people that wouldn't normally think, oh, this isn't for me? And I think one thing we could do, which actually came up in the morning session, is that there needs to be greater representation for more diverse groups, so that you see an example of yourself already programmed in the festival, and you think, okay, actually, no, this is for me. So we need to diversify and expand, the types of people that we're booking, so that more of those types of people then feel it's legitimate for them to do what they're doing and to then show up at the festival. I think that's one answer, but I think it's a question that still needs further thinking through, because access is crucial here, and so it'd be great to hear other people's thoughts on this as well.
I just want to say, Paul, that it's impressive that you do most of the programming through open calls. I imagine it's a really time-consuming process, and it's much more democratic than the way we do it here in Athens. But we always try to share our ideas and get other people involved in the programming. So and using, as I mentioned before, database like Cedrik's Syrphe, I don't know how you pronounce it, Cedrik. And but there's definitely a lot of room for improvement, for actually being more having a more democratic process and more inclusive process. But we always, as a program, try to have a balance of different ethnicities, of different, genders, of course, so that we, it's not that we show, we develop the what needs to be developed at this stage, I believe, and I believe it's clear to everybody that the previous model of white male performing 80% of the festival is not the way forward. So Cedrik.
To answer your question, there is a database called Mujeres que experimentan con sonido, Latino America, so women experimenting with sound in Latin America. And it's this kind of decentralized concept. It is simply a Google page, and any woman from or based in Latin America can add herself. This is in the title Women Who Experiment with Sound. And because anyone can add a woman or herself, adding herself, I saw this database becoming more and more pop music oriented with zero experimentation, like an advertisement page. So it's the internet inside the internet, because I don't see the point anymore. So I think even if you decentralize in a way, there must be one or more persons supervising also and filtering. This is what I do with the database. My database is a kind of dictatorship. It's not decentralized, because I'm mostly the person adding all this, and have a few friends and acquaintances helping me, providing me links. Hey, you forgot this person, you don't know that person. And sometimes I think, yeah, but it's so mainstream, maybe I don't want to add that. Oh, cool, I didn't know this person. But I want to filter, because it's with everything nowadays, with groups on social networks, on Facebook and so on. You have groups that are dedicated to, like there was a group run by Yan Jun in China, dedicated to experimental music and improvised music in Beijing. That's it, it's in the title, it's clear. There were people polluting non-stop. Hey, I'm from whatever city in the UK and I do this gig now. Watch it, please. And the Yanjun, the moderator, had to tell them, please, it's not the purpose of this group. And I see it everywhere online. It's just annoying. And I think there is no ideal solution. My database is a kind of dictatorship, and a decentralized database can be very interesting because it's more democratic. But then you find a lot of noise. This is a bit difficult, I think.
In terms of experimental music, it's really limited. There's not much, Onasis is the main institution funding that kind of projects. I'm just curating the borderline. It's not just I'm a member of staff of Onasis, so of Stegi. So I just work together with Stegi on those festival editions. So you're right. Onasis Foundation is, we have two major foundations here in Greece, in Athens, Onasis and Niarchos. And they're both doing lots of projects supporting the arts. Onasis is, however, more focused on new music than Niarchos is. And they're both doing lots of educational projects, as you mentioned before. At the same time, Onasis has a large percentage of the funding goes to health, especially after the pandemic. So in a way, that's a new challenge that now that the focus is on health issues and the pandemic, that how we keep the share for the arts. It seems that it's still okay, but it was a kind of an alarm when the pandemic started. And as an institution, it collaborates with lots of other European institutions and European programs that are focused more on the audience development, as you mentioned before, educational projects. And for some years, it was the main partner of Interfaces, a European project together with quite a few other institutions. And that was a lot about developing audiences and supporting educational projects. And it's a member of Sounds Now. So, for example, now in Tectonics, we had a project by Ictus, which was funded it wasn't part of our funding for Tectonic, was a different kind of a European project. So we had a separate funding for this. And within that context, I have to say that the challenge is how we can, sometimes it's easier for an institution like Stegi, and it can be cheaper having a European ensemble performing than actually a local one, which sounds a bit extreme, but that's the way things are. Because, for example, a European ensemble might have a separate funding, and in order to get that funding, they need to show that they're performing a lot. So, but the local ensemble is really depends on the actual gigs. So it's not that there's an ongoing funding for to build up a project, but it depends on the actual gig. So, and the actual gig might just be a fee, an average fee for the musicians, and that's it. Whereas, like a Central European ensemble might have funding that secures lots of different expenses throughout the year, or long-term funding. So that's definitely a challenge. And, money is not, can be really, an issue in that cases, in those cases. So there's an extra reason to develop that kind of partnerships. And in terms of this collaboration with festivals like Space21 or Iraqi-UK, I have to say that the feedback I have from people that have traveled to Kurdistan or to Beirut is that they really want to be part of it. For example, Dror Failer has been there, a couple of times, and he is really enthusiastic about joining forces with you people. So there's an element that's quite different from those centralized festivals, which I believe it's really crucial. And, we ought as artists and curators keep on supporting those initiatives. I believe that for each case, we have to think it individually. For example, for me, it's striking how the scene of Beirut, the experimental scene of Beirut, is really, inspiring. And I feel, here in Athens, we have lots to learn from that. And there's a sense of community and the sense of shared and mutual ground for the local scene that, I believe somehow sometimes we're lacking here in Athens. So if you ask me, the next step with Irtizal is having people from Beirut staying here for longer projects. So that's the current plan, is that, for example, Syrphe comes in Athens and he stays here for, like a few days. I mentioned before the idea of long-term projects and not just, like one-off single events or, like a big firework that comes and goes and, and the next day is like nothing has changed. So the idea is having people from Beirut visiting Athens and working with the local scene to develop new projects. Because I believe that here in Athens, there's lots of things we can learn from people like Syrphe. Mazen Kirbats was here like a few weeks ago, although he's based in Berlin, but still, I mean, I think his heart belongs in Beirut in the sense that he's part of that scene. So, and it's really, inspiring to see, like a city that's been through all those, like major scale disasters, and both in financial and, like the last incident, which was, like unbelievable, that manages to keep on going. And last time we spoke with Syrphe, he mentioned that the last edition of Irtizal, he could see new people, new audiences, people that he had never seen before in performances, and all of them being really enthusiastic about the events.
Yeah, I just briefly, just to say that, yeah, I think this idea about longer term collaborations and sharing of not just music making, but also scene making approaches is really key there. And I think that's probably, Hardi, you're going to talk a little bit about this as well. But that's really, I think, the spirit that we're approaching this collaboration with Space21 Sonorities is that, yeah, it's not just, here we'll exchange something for a one-off thing, but almost like we're forming a band together and we're going to work on releasing lots of albums into the future, rather than just just kind of doing the one show and that's it. So I think there's also, just to reflect briefly something Hardi you said earlier about building up resilience across our festivals, which are, all of us are operating in the margins. I mean, doing experimental music of any kind, there's always a threat of how do you survive, and it's usually one of the first things to go on the funder's priority list. And so actually, by kind of banding together and like sharing resources and practices, we're actually building up resilience there, which is going to, which if one of our locations, they lose their certain sort of infrastructure or support, they can still survive through the support of the other festivals. So I think moving forward in the future, for the type of festivals that we're running, that continue to have international ambitions, actually this is the kind of internationalization that's positive, that can build up resilience.
During a year or several years plan, a long project plan that's contained different part of projects, small project for promoting audience, for residency with the local artist, and also with the educational part, all this kind of part involving, but with a small projects, not a big project. Then it's the festival in the year. So it's like a feeding the project until it's coming, because it's, even for me, when I'm each year coming and thinking about the next year, I feel like some part is missing, because I'm just putting something in the place, but I have no background for it. It's very strange. You feel very strange when you meet the audience. It's not just artists be visible in the festival. Also, as you, Paul, also mentioned, I mean, it's important the audience is a participant. It's a platform for sharing, not just for sharing between the artists. It's also sharing between the audience and the generations. So a project that actually deeply and very detailed think about those aspects. So this project is important that have gained those aspects from different part. Then we see the differences with the audience, and they see differences with the how the artist is actually developed. But the most important part, what has come after us, what's come taking this project. So that's one thing that I see is so important in this festival collaboration, that we be aware of how we can deal with that, so we can continue. Otherwise, it would be very easy to stop somewhere.
Can I just say something about that?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Yeah, you mentioned about education, and I think it's really important. And in all festivals, we try to have an educational element in the sense which is integrated within the program. So, for example, in previous tectonics, now this year was difficult because of COVID, but in previous tectonics, we had Slatu from Iceland working with a group of kids. They did a public performance, which was so beautiful. I mean, it was part of the program. It wasn't just a workshop on the, like in the morning, and it's only for the kids and the parents, but it was actually for the audience, and it was really interesting to see taking place, and it was stimulating in all, like a proper event. And at the same time, I have a personal interest in projects that also address issues of disabilities. For example, like Alan Curtis from Argentina, we had him like in previous Borderline, traveling from Buenos Aires to work with a group of disabled adults, and then doing a public performance, which was part of the program. It wasn't on the sidelines. It was like in the stage, in the auditorium, and then we had, for example, Richard Dawson performing. So integration, inclusion, those are issues that are definitely should be central in a programming if we want, like as you mentioned, Hardi, seeing this as a plant that's being watered and then develops over the next years and decades and so on.
Because of the two cancellation, both Sharif and Christina, so we were stop early and finish early. I will just say thank you to everyone. Thank you to your time and your ideas. And of course, this is just a beginning of something. I believe there is a lot of potential, but it needs patience and time. And understanding different situation. Here, for example, we have an electricity problem always.
Is it worse than Beirut? Because I remember Beirut, we had quite a few cuts with electricity. So it's worse than...
It's quite similar, yeah. So, but still we're dealing with, and still we think this is part of our life, and we need to deal with, and even more in a creative way, not to annoying way, as Cage says. So this noise is not annoying us. It's more interesting to listen to those power generators. It sounds totally different. So thank you again. It was very interesting and very nice, and I'm very delighted to have you in the first symposium. I don't know if there will be another symposium next year, but at least we made one. Have a nice day.
Thank you so much, Hardi. Thank you all. And
nice
to meet you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.